I am Harry Thompson, 32 years old. My father Tom always said I'd never be a real man without his help. That Thanksgiving dinner when he raised his glass and announced to the entire family, "Real men build empires." Harry writes reports, still burns in my memory. Everyone laughed. My siblings, my cousins, even my own mother smiled. I sat there, silent, humiliated. My father had spent my entire life treating me like a disappointment because I chose a stable government job over joining Thompson Industrial Works, the family manufacturing company. While my brother Jake and sister Amanda were groomed to take over the business, I was labeled the soft one for studying business analytics. That night, something inside me shifted. Little did they know, their rejection would become their biggest mistake. Growing up as a Thompson meant knowing your place in the family hierarchy. My father built Thompson Industrial Works from nothing, turning it into a multi-million-dollar manufacturing empire. Jake, my older brother, was the chosen heir. He worked on the factory floor, learned every machine, and earned Dad's respect through sweat and muscle. Amanda, my younger sister, had the sharp business mind Dad admired. She handled contracts and negotiations with a ruthless efficiency that made him proud. Then there was me, the disappointment, the one who preferred spreadsheets to steal. Dad would tell people, "Harry is book smart, but he's just not cut out for the big leagues." When I graduated with honors in business analytics, he barely showed up to the ceremony. When I got my first government job, he said, "At least it's steady work." The message was clear, I wasn't Thompson material. The family group chat incident happened 6 months after that Thanksgiving disaster. Someone accidentally forwarded a screenshot of their private conversation to the main family group. Jake had written, "He's the only Thompson who still uses coupons." Amanda added, "His condo is smaller than my garage." Dad's response was the worst. "Some people are just meant to be small." They were discussing my modest lifestyle, my reliable Honda, my careful budgeting. To them, my financial responsibility was a source of shame. I read every word twice, feeling my face burn with humiliation. Without saying anything, I quietly left the group chat. But inside, something had snapped. They thought I was weak, small, insignificant. They had no idea what their soft family member was truly capable of. The quiet ones are always the most dangerous because nobody sees them coming. 3 weeks later, I visited my old college professor, Dr. Martinez, at the university. We were catching up over coffee when he casually mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "There was a weird public records leak last month," he said, stirring sugar into his cup. "Some environmental filings looked off. Companies claiming green tax credits for emissions they never actually reduced." He named several firms, and my heart stopped when he mentioned Thompson Industrial Works. "Probably just paperwork errors," he added with a shrug. But I knew my father. He'd cut corners anywhere he could to save money or boost profits. Dr. Martinez had no idea he'd just handed me the key to everything. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, my mind was racing. What if I looked closer? What if this soft son used his analytical skills for something more personal? Using my government clearance and data analysis training, I started digging into public procurement and environmental reports. What I found made my hands shake. Thompson Industrial Works had been systematically falsifying emissions data to qualify for green tax credits worth millions. They claimed to have installed expensive filtration systems that existed only on paper. They reported emission reductions that were mathematically impossible given their actual production levels. The numbers didn't lie, and I knew how to read them. Every fraudulent filing was signed off by Amanda. Every fake compliance report was approved by Jake. And behind it all was Dad, cutting corners to boost profits while stealing taxpayer money. I printed everything, organized it into neat folders, and locked it in my home safe. My family had always underestimated me. Now I had enough evidence to destroy them all. I needed advice, so I discreetly reached out to 3 people. First, I met with Rebecca Hayes, a whistleblower attorney who specialized in environmental fraud. She explained the legal process and the protections available to government employees who report corporate crimes. Second, I contacted Alex Chun, an investigative journalist who covered corporate corruption. He was interested but wanted more evidence. Third, I spoke with retired EPA Inspector William Burke, who confirmed that my findings represented massive fraud. All 3 meetings were unofficial. I wasn't ready to report anything yet. I wasn't looking for legal action or media attention. Not yet. I was planning something more personal, more satisfying. I wanted my family to know exactly who brought them down. The soft son they dismissed was about to become their worst nightmare. I applied for a position as a consultant with the State Environmental Compliance Agency, which audits companies receiving green tax credits. I used my middle name, Harry James, instead of Harry Thompson on my resume. My background in data analysis and government work made me a perfect candidate. During the interview, I mentioned my experience with environmental reporting and my attention to detail. They offered me the job within a week. I would be working on a special task force that investigates companies suspected of compliance violations. It was perfect. I now had official authority to dig into corporate environmental records. Better yet, I could influence which companies got selected for an audit. My family had spent years telling me I'd never amount to anything. Now I had the power to prove them wrong in the most devastating way possible. 6 months later, Thompson Industrial Works was randomly selected for an environmental audit. Of course, the selection wasn't actually random. I had carefully placed them on the priority list based on their compliance history and the size of their green tax credits. I volunteered to join the audit team and was assigned as the lead data analyst. My job was to examine their emissions reports and verify their claims. I grew a beard and lost weight, changing my appearance enough that I wouldn't be immediately recognized. When I walked into their offices for the first time in 5 years, none of the employees knew who I was. I was just another government bureaucrat there to check their paperwork. But I knew every corner of that building, every process, every machine. I had grown up hearing Dad brag about his operations. Now I would use that knowledge against him. The audit team meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. in the main conference room. I arrived early, setting up my laptop and organizing my files. Dad walked in first, followed by Jake and Amanda. They looked confident, probably thinking this was just another routine government check. Dad barely glanced at me. Jake started talking about getting coffee for the team. Then I stood up, pulled out my credentials, and introduced myself. Good morning. I'm Harry James, lead analyst for this environmental compliance audit. The silence was deafening. Dad's confident smile disappeared. Jake's mouth fell open. Amanda went pale. After a long moment, Dad said, Harry? I nodded calmly. Hello, Dad. Let's begin the audit. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The son they dismissed as weak was now the one with authority over their entire business. Dad immediately tried to throw his weight around. He called his lawyer, contacted his political connections, and demanded to speak with my supervisor. This is a conflict of interest, he shouted during a private conversation. My son can't audit my company. But the agency didn't bend. I had disclosed my family connection during the application process, and the legal department had cleared me to proceed. Blood relationships don't create immunity from investigation. If anything, my inside knowledge of their operations made me more qualified to spot irregularities. Dad's political favors meant nothing to career civil servants who valued integrity over influence. The investigation would proceed exactly as planned. For the first time in my life, I had power over my father, and he couldn't buy, bully, or charm his way out of it. On the third day of the audit, I found what I was looking for. Hidden in a subfolder of Amanda's computer was an internal memo she'd written 18 months earlier. The subject line read, Emission Report Adjustments. In the memo, she acknowledged that their actual emissions were 40% higher than reported, but she recommended continuing the false reporting to maintain their green tax credits. She had signed off on millions in fraudulent claims while knowing they were fake. I quietly photographed the memo and added it to the protected audit file. This wasn't just corporate fraud anymore. This was my sister actively participating in a criminal conspiracy. The family member who'd mocked my modest lifestyle had been stealing taxpayer money. I saved multiple copies of the evidence, knowing this single document could destroy not just the company, but Amanda's career and freedom. That evening, my family cornered me in an empty conference room. Dad was furious, his face red with anger. You're destroying your own family, he yelled. This company employs 200 people. You're going to put them all out of work. Jake tried the brotherhood approach. Come on, Harry. We're blood. You can't seriously be doing this. Amanda was crying, probably realizing her memo had been discovered. I listened to their pleas, their threats, their attempts at manipulation. Then I spoke, my voice calm and steady. You destroyed this family the moment you decided I wasn't one of you. You spent years telling me I'd never be a real man. Now you'll learn what real men actually do when they're pushed too far. I walked out, leaving them in stunned silence. The soft sun had finally found his backbone. 2 weeks later, Alex Chun, the journalist I'd spoken with months earlier, reached out. He'd heard rumors about the Thompson industrial audit and wanted to run a story. The EPA investigation was creating waves in the environmental compliance community. "I'm ready to publish," he told me over the phone. "This could be front-page news." I paused, considering my options. Media attention would destroy the company immediately, but it would also end my control over the situation. "Wait," I told him. "There's more coming. The full story will be worth the wait." I needed time to position myself strategically. Destroying my family was satisfying, but surviving the destruction would require careful planning. I wasn't ready to be the whistleblower hero. I had something more subtle in mind. Within days, Dad's lawyers contacted me with an offer. They wanted to settle quietly, offering me a six-figure payment and a non-disclosure agreement. The company would never admit wrongdoing, but they'd agree to compliance monitoring and pay back taxes. It was a generous offer, enough money to change my life significantly. But there was a catch. I would have to sign an NDA promising never to discuss my findings publicly. I would have to pretend the fraud never happened. I reviewed the documents carefully, then set them aside. I wasn't ready to sign anything yet. The money was tempting, but I wanted something more valuable than cash. I wanted acknowledgement. I wanted them to need me. I wanted to be the family member they couldn't dismiss or ignore ever again. The EPA ordered a temporary halt to operations at Thompson Industrial Works, pending further investigation. The news hit the manufacturing sector like a bomb. Shareholders panicked as stock prices plummeted. Major clients canceled contracts, unwilling to risk association with a company under federal investigation. The family business that had taken 3 decades to build was crumbling in 3 weeks. Dad aged 10 years overnight. Jake started drinking heavily. Amanda hired her own lawyer, distancing herself from the family decisions. Employees were laid off. Equipment was seized. The mighty Thompson Industrial Works was bleeding money and losing credibility. And I was the one holding the knife. The son they'd called weak had brought down their empire using nothing but patience, intelligence, and their own greed against them. The second offer came with much better terms. Triple my current salary, equity in the company, and a voice in major decisions. Everything I'd been denied was suddenly on the table. They wanted me to join the family business as a consultant, helping them navigate the legal challenges and rebuild their reputation. It was everything I'd supposedly wanted as a child, but I didn't accept. Instead, I set a condition that shocked them. "You'll pay me," I said calmly, "but I won't help you." I wanted the money, the recognition, the respect, but I didn't want to save them. I wanted them to struggle while paying me to watch. It was a cruel twist that none of them expected. The son who'd been excluded from the family business would now be paid by the family business to remain excluded. I agreed to sign a non-disclosure agreement, but only my version. My lawyer drafted terms that included a monthly retainer, access to company financial records, and complete silence from the family regarding my name or role in the audit. They were desperate enough to agree to anything. The NDA protected them from media exposure, but it also protected me from family retaliation. They had to treat me with respect, pay me regularly, and never publicly acknowledge our relationship. I would be their silent partner, their unwanted advisor, their constant reminder of what happened when they underestimated the wrong person. The contract was signed within a week. For the first time in my life, my family needed me more than I needed them. The power balance had shifted permanently. 3 months later, I learned that Dad had rewritten the family trust. Jake and Amanda would inherit everything. The manufacturing company, the family home, the investment accounts, all of it would go to his chosen children. My name was removed entirely from the estate planning documents. When I asked him about it, he was brutal. "You chose outsiders over family," he said. "You betrayed us for your government job. So now, you're not family anymore." He thought he was punishing me, cutting me off from the Thompson legacy. But I just smiled and showed him my latest retainer check. "And yet," I said calmly, "your company pays me every month to keep quiet." I deposited the check, took a photo of it, and hung it framed in my living room. Blood might be thicker than water, but contracts are stronger than blood. The monthly payments became a routine. Every first Friday, Thompson Industrial Works sent me a check for consulting services I never provided. I never cashed the first few, letting them accumulate in my desk drawer. Not because I needed the money, but because I enjoyed the symbolism. Each check represented their acknowledgement that I had power over them. Each payment was an admission that the soft son had become someone they couldn't ignore. I would photograph each check before depositing it, creating a permanent record of their dependence. My family had spent years telling me I'd never amount to anything. Now they were literally paying me to prove them wrong. The irony was delicious, and I savored every moment of it. My career flourished in ways I never expected. I was promoted within the state environmental compliance agency, eventually becoming the director of clean energy compliance for multiple sectors. My success in the Thompson Industrial case made me a rising star in government regulation. I now oversee environmental audits across dozens of companies, including many of Jake and Amanda's suppliers and competitors. I became their indirect gatekeeper, the bureaucrat who could make or break their business relationships. They couldn't challenge my authority without violating the NDA. They couldn't complain about my decisions without admitting our family connection. I had become the most powerful person in their professional world, and there was nothing they could do about it. The government job they'd mocked had given me authority over their entire industry. Amanda's daughter got married last spring. The wedding was beautiful, based on the photos I saw online. The whole family was there, smiling and celebrating. Uncle Jake gave a speech about family loyalty. Grandpa Tom talked about the Thompson legacy. There was no mention of the uncle who'd saved the family business from federal shutdown. I wasn't invited, of course. I was no longer part of the family, according to the trust documents. But I didn't mind. I had something better than their acceptance. I had their respect, purchased monthly through automated bank transfers. I had their silence, guaranteed by legal contracts. I had their fear, earned through demonstrated competence. I didn't need their love anymore. I had their acknowledgement, and that was enough. A year later, Dad sent me a handwritten letter. His handwriting was shaky, his words bitter. "You got your revenge," he wrote. "Are you happy now? You destroyed everything we built." I read the letter twice, then filed it in the same folder as the NDA documents. I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. He still didn't understand what had really happened. This wasn't about revenge. This was about respect. I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply revealed what was already there. Their greed, their fraud, their willingness to steal from taxpayers while mocking their own family members. I had held up a mirror, and they didn't like what they saw. The letter went into my filing cabinet, labeled Control, right next to the contracts that guaranteed their monthly payments. 6 months later, Thompson Industrial Works missed a payment. The check that usually arrived on the first Friday was nowhere to be found. I didn't call Dad or Jake or Amanda. I didn't send angry emails or threatening messages. I simply forwarded the matter to my lawyer, who sent a formal breach of contract notice. The penalty clauses in our NDA were substantial. Missing payments would result in immediate termination of the agreement, leaving them vulnerable to media exposure and legal action. Within a week, the missing check arrived with a formal apology and assurance that it wouldn't happen again. They had learned their lesson. I was no longer someone they could ignore or dismiss. I was someone they had to respect, whether they liked it or not. I visited Dad in the hospital last month. He'd had a heart attack, probably brought on by stress from the business struggles. He looked older, frilier, diminished. The proud patriarch who'd built an empire was now a sick old man connected to machines. His pride was gone, replaced by quiet resignation. "You were always more dangerous than I thought," he whispered. I sat beside his bed, my voice gentle but firm. "I was never dangerous, Dad. I was just patient." We talked for an hour about the family, the business, the choices we'd all made. He apologized, sort of. I forgave him, sort of. But nothing really changed. The contracts remained in place. The payments continued. The power dynamic stayed exactly as I designed it. Years have passed since that humiliating Thanksgiving dinner. Thompson Industrial Works still sends me a monthly check, though I rarely cash them anymore. The money isn't important. What matters is the acknowledgement. They need my silence more than I need their money. I keep the latest check in my desk drawer, unspent and untouched. Not because I don't need the money, but because they need the silence. And that, finally, makes me feel like a real man. The son they dismissed as weak had become the family member they couldn't survive without. I had proven that real men don't need to build empires. Sometimes, they just need to topple them. And in the end, that's exactly what I did. The soft son had become the hardest man in the Thompson family.